The Data Nerd, Episode 5, Presenting Data for Executives. So you should never put a KPI just as a number on its
No,
own?
no. Uh, Is that good? Is that bad? As an executive, am I supposed to do something now because it's 28.5 million?
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with Tableau training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Welcome to the Data Nerd podcast. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Chris Tauber as our guest. Chris specializes in dashboards and presentations for executives. He's worked with business leaders at a lot of fun brands, including Papa John's, Lego, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Travel Plus Leisure, and Kohler. Chris loves Tableau, but he can tolerate Power BI. So Chris, I gotta ask you
Yeah,
actually, before I do that, I will ask you about the Tableau versus Power BI question
sure.
because that's a hot topic,
Yep,
especially if you
yep,
see some conversations on LinkedIn or whatnot. So we'll get to that in a moment. But
yeah.
before I do that, welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No,
Yeah,
of
real
course.
pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following you for some time now, and I've taken a lot of inspiration from your posts on LinkedIn. You
Oh,
know, I
great.
work in Tableau, and
Yeah,
I mean, we all have, for the most part, we report things, whether it's to executives or not. But I think a lot of what you've really put out there on, you know, how to report out to executives, I've taken and tried to adopt myself, and so I'm
oh,
really
great.
excited to talk about this topic on
Yeah,
reporting or presenting to executives.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. No, glad that helps you. Any of those posts, if they just spark a better idea, that's what I'm going for. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
awesome. So
Yeah,
what I like to do on for all of my guests is an introductory question. So this
yeah,
is a data nerd podcast, and
yeah.
I like to ask everyone if they are a data nerd, and if so, tell me a story or when you realized you are one.
Yeah, no, I love that question. It made me kind of rethink my life choices. I would say I am a data nerd, and when you said like how did I know or
Mhm.
when did I become one, I used to be a magazine editor, and here I'm based in Orlando, Florida. I was working at a travel magazine called Island, and it's all about like going to beautiful places and. A lot of our staff and photographers would go to Tahiti, the Seychelles, like the Caribbean, everywhere. I found myself loving to be in front of my computer and studying all the data of all these places. So I like found all like the airport arrivals and departures like throughout the Caribbean, and then I found the hotel occupancies. And I basically, this was a number of years ago, I put together my own data lake, I guess. Like I
Mhm.
pulled in as much data as I could, and I tried to figure out, oh, what else should we be covering? What should we be doing? And I loved it, and no one else on the staff understood what the heck I was doing. Because shouldn't I just get on a plane and just go to an island? Like that's what the job was for a lot of
Yeah,
folks.
yeah,
Man, I
yeah.
just loved getting into it. So yeah, what coming out of that, I realized, wait a minute, people are loving to just look at overwater bungalow photos. They don't care if they ever get a chance to go there or not. They just love it. And so I talked to the team and said, guys, we just need to do overwater bungalows anywhere in the world. Photos galore. Do it in
Mhm.
the magazine. Do it in the newsletter. Do it on the web. And it just exploded. And that was great. And it came out of me just being heads down into the data for a while and figuring some stuff out. So
That's
yeah,
great.
but
That's great. So I
that's
got to
great.
ask, did you get to travel though when you worked there?
Well, yeah, I did get to travel some. I did get to travel some. My kids were really little back then, so I
Yeah,
would just get to the Caribbean, or in Florida, get to some of the islands off of the coast here. I didn't do any big trips because I always
yeah,
have like babies around.
yeah. No, of course, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully, you still enjoy that aspect
Oh
of traveling, right? Now,
yes, no, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Yep,
That's
yep.
great. That's great. No, that's great story, and it's always nice to hear, when people started, and even myself, I had to think back. I'm like, it just kind of happens. And, sometimes you don't realize when you start enjoying working with data and
Yeah.
reflecting back. Sometimes it's nice to look back and see, at what point in time that your journey kind of started.
Yeah. No, that's true. Exactly. Yeah. You don't kind of know how life where it's going to take you, and then
Yep.
oh, here I am, which is
Great.
great. I'm very happy.
Awesome. So now I got to ask you this question
Yeah.
based on your introduction. You talked about Tableau and Power BI. You said you're a Tableau guy, but you
Yeah.
tolerate Power BI. So that's telling me that you prefer Tableau to Power BI.
I
I,
do.
you can see behind me here, right?
Yes.
I'm a Tableau guy too. Uh,
Yeah.
I have not touched Power BI, so I can't speak to it firsthand, but I do love Tableau, and I, I didn't really have a reason to start Power BI,
Yeah.
and so you've used both. So from the
Yeah.
perspective of the tool itself, or even just on topic on presenting data for executives, which
Yeah.
tool is better, Tableau or Power BI?
Good question. Yeah, from my experience, I think Tableau for executives is the clear winner, and I've always gravitated to that because it's just more polished, and you have a lot more flexibility in the design choices that you can make. And over the years, I always tried to avoid Power BI. I kept missing it. Like people would say, "Oh, well, can you do this in Power BI?" I said,
Yeah,
"I can't. I can design some things for you, you would have to do it." And eventually it caught up to me where enough people had asked if I could do Power BI. I realized, all right, let me dive in, let me
yeah,
learn it. And so I do have a couple of clients that I've worked in Power BI, and it's again for me. I know it's really powerful. A lot of people like it, but for me, I love Tableau and the flexibility and the polish I can give to visualizations. I just can't. It's just too clunky for me in Power BI.
yeah, and that's what I've been hearing as well. And is it the design, or I mean, sorry, the visual aspect of Tableau is superior to Power BI in terms of
Yeah,
the types of
yeah.
visuals you can make, right?
I
And,
think I think it is. Yeah,
yeah, and even just from like a community perspective,
yeah,
you've been to Tableau conference, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh, I
The
love.
the
Yeah,
community in Tableau is great, and
yep.
it does not give you any incentive to want to leave and use
Yeah.
something else.
Oh, exactly. I loved going to Tableau conferences. Yeah, like we were talking. It's a great community. I think it does tend to be a bit more the creative folks who are using Tableau just
Yeah.
because they can appreciate what I appreciate about it.
Mhm.
And again, that comes back to my magazine background. I most often work with like creative teams, and not so much like the hardcore like
Yeah.
just the folks that are more the engineering side. Um, so I just feel more comfortable in that with that community and that type of tool. But again, Power BI is can do a lot, and a lot of
Yeah. Of
places use it. But uh,
course.
when I have to switch in within an hour, I'm doing some Tableau. I have to jump into Power BI. It's always like, it doesn't feel quite right. I want to get back over to Tableau as soon as I can.
Yeah, you know what really drew me to Tableau was um, I, I was into art when I was growing up. I loved
Yeah,
art. Never really pursued it professionally or anything of that sort. Got into
yeah,
data analytics. I love that as well. But when I started using Tableau, and I'm sure it's the same for whatever tool you use, the combination of art and data
yeah,
combined is
yeah.
really what I loved, and that's why I love it.
Yeah,
And I'm assuming that's kind of what drew you in as well, right? You were working
absolutely.
on both sides, right?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, I mean, I love the artwork that you've got behind you there. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I didn't
yeah,
create this myself. Actually, you know what? This I did
yeah.
do it by hand. This
Oh,
one,
yeah. That's
yeah.
really good. That's great.
So for those who
Yeah,
can't see me on video, if this is
yeah,
audio, I drew a Tableau logo on the whiteboard behind me, but everything else is stickers.
yeah.
My
Well,
wife
it's
has an Etsy shop, and she
okay.
created a lot of that for me, so she helped me out. I gotta give her some credit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, well, my wife is still in magazines, and so a lot of times we have, the people that she works with are still very creative, art directors, photographers, and it's I really appreciate that, and again, it felt more comfortable in that environment. And
Yeah.
so I can take some of that creativity and design and translate it into Tableau a lot more easily than Power BI. And even like you see, I'm not at the level of what some people are doing in Tableau Public for years, but you do see like artwork there where
Yeah.
people
Oh,
are
of course.
making
Yeah.
just
It's
beautiful,
beautiful.
beautiful work.
Beautiful.
You just
Well, I
can't
think
miss.
our audience or your audience is a little different, right? Executives aren't looking for the most prettiest and visually appealing thing. They
Yeah,
actually want something to address an issue or answer questions, right?
yeah,
To them, it doesn't matter how you get it to them.
yeah,
But and this is what we're going to talk about. I'm sure there are ways that you can design a dashboard to
mm,
present to executives in a way that they'll be easier to for them to understand.
yep,
Right? So can you
yep,
talk about maybe some of the best practices or how you can use business intelligence tools
yeah.
to help executives, um, I guess, track KPIs or anything for
Yeah.
that matter?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my secret is a hierarchy. And I really learned that again. I've designed for newspapers and magazines when I was younger, and I've just carried that over into dashboard design and presentation design. And so what I found when I started doing this, my first like corporate job in the data world was at SeaWorld here in Orlando.
Hmm.
And I, was getting a handle on what the data meant, but I just was surprised at that the like presentations I was seeing, the lack of dashboards reports had no design hierarchy at all. So you didn't know where to look. And I've been so trained to here's your headline. That's the most important thing. Here's your main visual. That's what you want to see next. Now here's how you get guided into the story. And as you go into the story, then you'll have some sidebars, some secondary information, some secondary photos. And I just was so used to that that when I saw in the corporate environment, it's just, because people aren't trained, they're trained in different ways. So they may know the data really well, but they're just putting it all on a slide. So it's like you've got 20 numbers
Yeah,
and which one is most important?
kind of
And
defeats the
so
purpose of
yeah,
putting it on because there's no clarity. You don't know what to look at, right?
exactly, exactly. And so when I just started applying a hierarchy, like, okay, well, again, and from an executive's perspective, they're very busy people. They're jumping from one meeting to another, and they need to wrap their heads around different concepts very quickly. I thought, well, this could be very helpful to them if I establish a hierarchy. So say those 20 numbers you might have on a slide. Let's think what's most important to the executive, which number? That's the one I'm going to play up. Which other numbers then support that big one? Let me position those accordingly. So as that executive is, oh, here's the big number. Oh, why is that up or down? Oh, I can then flow down and see why. And then if you have any further questions, well, let's look at those, the 10th and 11th most important numbers. Those will offer some clues. But by just applying a hierarchy and then having a design that kind of guides them through how the numbers are all fit together, that's really been big for me. And I continue to do that, whether I'm doing a presentation, a dashboard, just any chart even. I always try to keep that in mind. And yeah, it always seems to help.
So those best practices you talked about, can that not be applied to everyone, not just executives?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I talk to people, I always try to stress that at the executive level, and then the director level. Once you get it into like the analyst level,
Mm,
then hey, design things however you want. You're just trying to figure stuff out on your own, possibly. You aren't
yeah,
necessarily sharing it yet. So I have no opinion. It's all about what makes sense to you, and how you're going to design stuff. But as you start sharing it out, and as that sharing rises up the ranks, that's when I highly suggest bringing it together, getting the hierarchy, getting some of the techniques that that I've learned over the years, and that will help you to communicate it better.
yeah,
So yeah, no, absolutely. The higher up you go, the clearer the communication has to be.
yeah. I mean, because they're busy people, right? And
Yeah,
they want typically key takeaways and what
yeah,
can they action, right? And so the
yeah,
way that you present it to them, you want to show those key takeaways, right? And so
yeah.
so what happens? Okay, let's suppose you have a project where you have to present a dashboard to executives. Are you dealing with them from the get-go, from the start? And are they the ones who are supplying you with the KPIs, or do you have to come up with them yourselves? How do you determine what's the most important metric? And then how do you determine in your hierarchy, what are those secondary metrics? Is it you, or is it the stakeholders, or the business, or the executives?
That comes up a lot, and I think that is a bit different what I do versus what a lot of analysts or dashboard developers do. I talked to one time, and I said, "Yeah, so I'm putting these KPIs on the top. I'm doing these below." And he said, "Oh, why are you doing that? Did this leader ask you to?" I said, "No, I'm from my experience that those are going to be the most important." He goes, "Oh,
Mm,
I just do whatever I'm told," and and there's a fine line. Sometimes that works. Like if an executive is very familiar with the data and has already put a hierarchy together and says, "Hey, I need to look at these three numbers, and then these are the next level." That's fantastic.
yeah,
Just from my experience, that surprisingly doesn't happen as often. What I found is an executive might say, "Hey, I need to look at these three numbers and this number and this number and this number and this one, this number," and they'll just put together 12 numbers. So recently, as an example of that, I even did a dashboard where, okay, great, we've got the 12 numbers on here that the executive said he wanted to see, but I've subtly designed it where five of them were at the top,
mm,
three were below, and then two were kind of off to the side. And he said it was great. Like it was that's it's just kind of helping them, to sort
yeah.
of figure out what's best.
So I guess they know what they want, and they want it in a certain way, right?
Yeah,
But you're the professional. You're the one who kind of
yeah,
designs the dashboard. So you have an expertise as well. And maybe they don't know what they want
yeah,
until you show it to them.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
does that ever happen where they come to you with an ask and they want it a certain way? You may not 100% agree with it.
yeah,
You'll do it, but then
yeah.
you then develop a second version and
Yes.
say, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And maybe when they see it, they may like it better. How do you
Yes.
deal with disagreements with executives?
Yeah.
Whether it's designing a dashboards or determining, what's most important or how you want to show it.
Yeah, yeah. I had an example of that recently where an executive said, and I think this is common, for a lot of people to hear this. Like, we have an Excel report. It does what I want. It shows me what I want. Just put that in Tableau. And
Yeah.
for years, I keep thinking that's going to die out. Every year that
No, it does not die out.
you've heard it.
Yeah.
So, so recently, what I try to do in that case, that's kind of the extreme example of an executive saying something that I would suggest not doing it that way.
Yeah.
If they want to see it in an Excel sheet, I'll make the Tableau look like the Excel sheet, but then I'll build in some interactivity, some of the hovers, some of the a chart even like once using dynamic zone visibility now or some other options in there,
Mm,
and just kind of ease them in to what could be a better way to look at it. And so they're satisfied when they see, great, the dashboard looks like Excel, fantastic. And then when I start showing them, oh, when you hover, you can see this. Oh, great. And then, oh, look, when you can click this and flip and see what's happening underneath. Like, oh my gosh. And then, hey, and then click here, and now you can see the chart of this. That eases them in more, I believe, than just saying, that's wrong. Let's just go full in on the visuals and let me show you. And they don't have you haven't walked them along to kind of ease them into how it could be. So that's what I found. Like you just need to sort of like guide some people along. Every once in a while, I have somebody who doesn't want to go. They want the numbers. They only want the numbers, and that's great. You just kind of have to accept that, and then I check that off, and then I kind of pursue some of the other folks who are more open to some of those ideas.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you
It's
can't
true.
change everybody.
Every case is a little bit different, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
then do you have to train them on how to use the dashboard as well? Like if
yeah,
you're designing it differently than what they're expecting, or maybe they don't know how to use it. Like creating a dashboard is one thing, presenting
yeah.
it is another thing, but then having them use it, or do they
Yes,
use it? Like, are they expected to use it, or are they just expecting you to give them the numbers, or
yeah.
do you have to train them?
Yeah, I what I do, yeah, to try I do find that training is helpful. And what I'll try to do before a dashboard project, before I'll do a PowerPoint that goes along with it, so that kind of echoes back the strategic objectives of what they want to see, the type of data that we have available, and then I'll start doing like here. So here are the prototypes. Here's what it's going to look like, and we can have that discussion before I dive in.
Mm.
Then after it's done, I'll do another follow-up presentation that shows, hey, so here is what it looks like. Here are the questions it can answer, and here's how you can find those answers. So again, whenever any of us make a dashboard and we feel it's as intuitive as possible because we know how it works, you can't assume that the in-person, especially an executive, is going to know how it works.
Yeah.
So I do try to provide basically a very short instruction manual, very visual. If you want to find out this, look, this button can do that, and that seems to help a lot, just to get that familiarity going with
Do
people.
you find that a lot of times they just want it in PowerPoint though? Like you create the dashboard, but then you just need a screenshot and put it on a PowerPoint slide?
Yeah, yeah, I found that there are some executives that will not interact. They just it's not that they don't want to; they just don't have time to go through it and to
Yeah.
learn that. Some of them do, and that's great. Then you can really really explore like what you can do with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot that simply don't have the time. So that is why I build basically two kinds of dashboards. One
Mm.
is that fits perfectly on a PowerPoint slide, so I can export it, or anybody can export it.
Mm.
And in fact, like I've made those where if you have like a weekly report, for example, and it has 10 slides, let's build them all in Tableau. They can, update automatically, and you can just export them all at once, send them off to leadership team, and
Mhm.
they're good to go. And then I do one that's taking advantage of Tableau's subscriptions, which just sends a screenshot anyway. So I make one, not the dynamic sizing within Tableau, but I
Mm.
actually will make one that will fit well on a phone with scrolling, and that will be the subscription version that people will get in their inbox, every morning, and they can just open it up. It's static. They just scroll through. They
Yeah.
see, oh, it's good, and they keep on moving. So yeah, so I do make a lot of versions that are meant to be static for executives, knowing that they're just going to look at it on a static slide or static on their phone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that makes sense.
yeah,
So when it comes to like some of those design best practices, right? Like
yeah,
how you design them, there are a lot of things you need to consider. Um, Use of color, the
yeah,
types of visuals. So when you're creating these for executives, are there certain types of visuals that they prefer over others, or do they like color? Do they not like
yeah.
color? Um, Sometimes executives just like a pie chart, right? And I don't know
Yeah.
how you feel about that. I know a lot of people dislike that. Uh,
Yeah.
what's your experience been like?
Yeah.
The what best practices and what they're looking for, what they like?
Yeah, what I found, and again, it's nothing new, but I have built, I don't know, thousands of charts by now, and hundreds of dashboards. And what I found is that the bar chart and the line chart, they do a lot of the work.
Yeah,
Um, sc- Once, if you need to go a little bit deeper, scatter plots are great for showing a lot of information at once that you can still digest. And then, I'll do a box and whisker plot, but that needs some more explanation for this audience usually. So yeah, I'll almost always default to line charts, bar charts, and then in terms of color, yeah, that's a huge topic. And what I do is I always do use, for a typical US audience, red means bad, green
yeah.
means good. For the colorblind issue, I'll always encode it in a second way with like either an up arrow, a down arrow, the length of
Mm,
the bar above and below a zero line. So that's what I do with the colors. And then any other colors I use are usually pretty muted. I'll do like an actual, like say this year versus last year. This year, I'll make it a dark blue. Last year, I'll either make it gray or a very light blue. And I'll basically use that color palette over and over and save any additional color for, a little more complex bar chart, of course, a scatter plot. But it's pretty basic what I'm doing in terms of color palettes for
well, I
those.
mean, and sometimes the simplicity is what you need, right?
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
use when I talk about it, when I teach students, tell them about using color purposefully. Use purposeful
yes,
color. Don't use color just because it's available to you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's good advice. I mean, basically, that's how when I'm posting on LinkedIn or giving advice like this, all of it is really meant to be just think about it. Like, if you have a reason for using orange, pink, blue, purple, and you really thought about it, and that's best for your audience, then that's great. I'm not going to say anything. But if you didn't think about it, if you just, oh, let's just do that, and you kept moving, that's the issue. Like, was that the right decision or not? And
Yeah.
that's always what it's about. Just think about what will help your audience understand this the most.
Yeah,
And if
that's a
that's
good
the right
way.
call, do it.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it before you start using colors.
Yeah.
How about the company branding? Like company branded colors, do you want to, is that something you want to incorporate on the dashboards?
Yeah, so that I've had some discussions about that as well. And my analogy I do with that is like, okay, so McDonald's has red and yellow. Those are their corporate colors, right?
Yeah.
They don't make their hamburgers red and yellow. The hamburger should not be red and yellow. A hamburger should be the color that they should be, so you want to have the hamburger. The
Yeah.
red and yellow is in the packaging. So that's what I do as well in dashboards and presentations. If a company has a branded color palette, I'll absolutely do that in the packaging. I'll make sure the headers represent the brand colors. Of course, in a PowerPoint, it's easier, but the chart itself, I treat as a hamburger. Like,
You
if
want
it
neutral colors on there, right?
yeah, or if red and yellow help it will, but I would like with those blues and those reds and the greens, that's what the chart should be to communicate. So um that's and every once in a while if I do that usually helps. I'm able to kind of win people over and kind of show them as well.
Mm,
Every once in a while they have to use brand colors and that's best for their audience.
yeah.
Great. But I do have to raise that point that um that the brand colors are meant to be for marketing, for communicating a brand message. They are not meant to communicate data.
Oh, of
Um,
course, yeah. And like you
so,
said, it becomes tricky when your brand color is red, right?
yes.
Red almost always means bad. And so
Yeah.
how do you incorporate that into the dashboard becomes a little tricky. But I
Yeah.
like the way that you phrased it. It's, use it as part of the packaging, not in the actual
Not the meat.
visualization of the data.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, don't put it in the meat. Put it in the package.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about
Yeah.
storytelling? All right. So you've put this all
Yeah.
together. You have a dashboard and they can see the numbers.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm assuming on like your KPIs at the top, you want to make them big and you want to show
Yeah.
year over year growth,
Yeah.
right? Up
Or
and
a
down.
comparison is something. Year over year is like the basic comparison, but compare to a target, compare to a benchmark, compare to last month, compare to something. That's the key to a KPI.
So you should never put a KPI just as a number on its
No,
own.
no. I post about that a lot. You and I both, I'm sure, have seen
Yeah.
dashboards that have just a big number. It'll just say, sales 28,532,000. Is that good? Is that bad? As an executive, am I supposed to do something now because it's 28.5 million? That's not the KPI. The KPI is, we're 20% below target. That's, oh my gosh, I need to go do something. We need to talk to people. Why is it below target? On
Yeah.
the other side, too, if we're 20% above target, well, that's amazing. Why is it working? What can we do to even scale it even further? Or is that going to continue? That's what gets people um, taking some type of action. Just having the number that's sitting there, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. There
So
has to
it's
be some
context.
some sort of context. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Context.
context,
Yeah.
but you
Context.
need a comparison as a KPI.
Yeah. So I've seen your LinkedIn post and you put together dash this, not that.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so and those are great because those are like when you look at that, um, you know exactly what you should or should not do.
yeah,
How do you come up with those ideas? Is it just based on your experience about what you're doing? And I mean, like,
yeah.
it's great. It's great. But like, talk to me a little bit about,
Yeah.
what your thought process is in coming out with some of those posts on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, it's always my opinion. Do this, not that. I know that sometimes the not that people will say, "Hey, wait, no, there's a reason for that." And again, I love the conversation because I love to like just kind of spark some ideas with folks, like I was saying. But yeah, the idea is I have examples folder on my desktop.
Mm.
Whenever I see a dashboard, a presentation, a chart, anywhere, I'll toss it in there. And then I have an ideas folder or ideas list, and I'll just add some ideas like, oh, this could have been like that, or I saw saw this issue here, and then I'll just see what kind of bubbles up. And I try now to post twice a week. Dash this, not that. I always think, well, I think I said everything I need to. There's always more to say. There's always some
Yeah.
example. There's always something else, and I just try to vary it too. And some things I think help people more than others, maybe. A big one recently was like, should a dash have a black background? I said no. I said, have no background is the dash this, not that is the black background. And that, there's some reasons to have a black background, and that was interesting. But for the most part, I found like no background is the best
I,
for most
I
hobbies.
think white space is good. Some people
Yeah,
sometimes think that if you have too much white space, that's a bad thing because you need to fill everything in. But
yeah,
I don't. I disagree with that. I think
yeah.
having white space is good, provides clarity
Yeah.
and a clean dashboard, right?
Yeah, well, it's part of that hierarchy. It guides people where you want their eye to go. So again, there's a reason for the white space. I have it like I'll use it a lot as well. Yeah, to put some on the right hand side and just put some headings over there so people
Mhm.
can clearly see what they're looking at, and then it guides them over to, okay, now here's the chart. So yeah, it's very thoughtful. But yeah, white space absolutely is critical, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is great. A lot of good insights here. A lot of things to think about. And you know, can you tell everyone how they can connect with you? Maybe do
Yeah.
you have a website? Connect on LinkedIn. What's the
Yeah,
best way
yeah.
to
I mean,
connect?
please connect on LinkedIn. I always love to have conversations there. And then also, yeah, at dataforexecs.com. That's my website, and that's where I put a lot of the archived did this not that I used to do. Now I do dash this not that, as well as I've done a magazine and a guide to dashboard storytelling and all that. So that's all on there as well.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, please be sure to connect with Chris and love this conversation, Chris.
Yeah.
We should definitely maybe on I'm sure you can talk about other topics as well. So maybe we'll connect in the future and
Oh,
then
happy
do
to.
another podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing this podcast. Thanks for getting this going too. All of us data nerds have to stick together.
Of course, of course. All right, Chris,
Great.
thank you so much.
Yeah, nice talking with you.